What's up, everybody? Axe Wizard here. Wanted to give another update on the Cairn system now that I've had a few weekends to actually play it and try it and like really try it out. And if anything, I love this system even more after spending many hours playing it with my kids. And yeah, so if you haven't watched my first video, I'll just kind of give you a rundown of it. It's a very simple system. This whole little booklet that I printed out from this site, CairnRPG.com, has all the resources there that you can just do it. It's completely free. If you want to buy the actual paperback version, you can do it. There's a few different places that you can get it there, but yeah, so I downloaded it, I printed it out. They even have like booklet formatting, so you could print it out duplex, like double-sided. Just make sure you have it set to flip on the short edge rather than the long edge. And yeah, so I have this little booklet, super cool, and this is the entire system. It's very small. It's like 14 pages, if that. And most of that is just like randomized tables and stuff like that. So after playing it for a few weekends with my boys, when we our first session, we just rolled completely random characters, just using everything, you know, from the name and background table. So I'm gonna change this to be dark mode, force dark page, and then I'm gonna go into SRD here. So this is basically where this is the SRD here. This is just basically this booklet. You can just look it up online and whatnot. This gives you everything that you need to know about the game. And so here is where we are. So you see, like, rolling a character, we just start with the basic stuff: 3 days rations, a torch, and 3d6 gold pieces. And then we randomized completely random characters. So we did name and background, surnames, you know, we have the background here. So we just randomized all this stuff by rolling dice. So I've got the character sheets here for the first characters that my boys rolled. And my youngest rolled, I can't read this handwriting. Let's see. Oh, cleric. There we go. Okay, so my youngest, the background was a cleric. He rolled a character named Grunwit, and we completely randomized everything, including his stats, and he ended up getting a little bit of armor, and he has pretty good hit protection because he got like a scar or two. And we also randomized the equipment. So he had a drill, a bottle, tinderbox, and a 10-foot pole. And then my eldest rolled a guy named Breagle, who is an alchemist, or his background is as alchemist. Very gregarious, athletic kind of person, balding. So we quickly called him Bald Breagle, like a bald eagle. And he started out with a battle axe, and his equipment was like a pulley, a chisel, a lens, and yeah, so that's what he started with. Now, on the very first playthrough, I just threw in some of the random minions that I guess not random, but like there's only like 4 minions or 4 enemies they give you in the game to start with, at least in the SRD. So there's Root Goblin. I guess there's more than 4. There's Root Goblin, Hooded Man, Cobblehounds, Wood Troll, Frost Elf, and Boggart. So I threw the Hooded Man at them. So I was like, as they were traveling on the road, I saw there was a Hooded Man that was kind of going in the same direction ahead of them. And they walked by, and they just like made snide remarks at him. Like my youngest started like you know, he's role playing whatever fantasy he wants, so he doesn't get to just talk to people a lot. Like he doesn't get to just talk smack to people. So he was living it up, man. He was having a blast. So they antagonized this Hooded Man, who, you know, turns out to have a spell book and stuff. Well, when I randomized the spell book he had, it was the Summon Idol spell, and so I just basically modified it in my head to summon like this big stone golem. So they were fighting this golem, and then my oldest was like, hey, I have a chisel, can I like use my chisel on the golem? And I'm just like, heck yeah, it's like, you know, Pokemon, that attack was super effective. So in the rule set, you can make it so an attack, if like normally like in D&D, if it would have like advantage or something because of, you know, some cool thing, in Cairn it's just called enhanced, and you don't roll to attack, you just roll the damage dice. Well, if it is enhanced, it goes up to a D12 die, no matter what. So his battle axe was already doing like D8 or D10 or something. I think it was D10, and I just, yeah, go ahead and roll a D12. So it was enhanced. And then my youngest is like, hey, I have a drill. Will that work? I'm just like, sure. So my boys made short work of this golem that was summoned. You got one with a chisel, just chiseling this thing, and you got another one with a drill. Oh my god. And they thought that was super great. I thought it was awesome. We were having a blast with it. And then the old man, like, as soon as his golem got wasted in like a single turn, he like took off running, and they chased him down. That was some of the fun we had. There was lots of other adventures that we had in that. Basically, for that one, to just quickly jump in the game, I just made up a story about how they're like, you know, they're two acquaintances who are kind of falling on hard times, and they decided that they would try to be treasure hunters. And so they took a job to go find this this artifact for somebody. And they went to these old ruins, and then they found the artifact, and they had to fight some monsters in there and stuff like that. And then they had to carry the artifact back, which was bulky, so it took up 2 inventory slots. And that was fun. They kept having to like make a choice of like what to throw out and like what to keep. The thing I like about this system is that since you only have 10 inventory slots, it's a lot easier to keep track of what you have. And since the inventory plays such a key part in the game, especially like if you're a spellcaster, basically if you have a full inventory, if your bags are full, your hit protection goes to 0. So you're over encumbered, like you can't dodge any attacks or anything like that. So you always want to keep at least 1 slot free. And yeah, so that was a really cool mechanic that I liked. And you know, with sort of D&D and Pathfinder, I often felt that like tracking inventory was a real pain. And you know, especially with Pathfinder, like there was a lot more inventory rules that were laid out, and for the most part, I just chose to ignore a lot of it. Like if it's somewhat feasible, I think you should be able to do it. You know, my youngest, when we were playing Pathfinder, kept trying to take like every weapon. I'm like, dude, at this point, you're packing like 6 scimitars, 7 spears, 2 battle axes, and a warhammer. You can't carry all that around. So, but you know, for this, you got 10 slots, and you can manage that. And the cool thing is that since you only have 10 slots, you're always looking at your inventory. And so I found that my boys were leveraging a lot of the stuff they had in their inventory, as opposed to just say, oh, I want to walk up and attack him, or I want to just attack him. You know, and so they were looking through, well, you know, I've got this pulley. Maybe I could like rig up some rope or something like that. Or, the earlier example where they used the drill and the chisel to decimate that stone golem. That was awesome. In my last play session with the boys, they were given the characters that they were playing. Let's see, one guy named Scrog, who his background was a gravedigger. This is my oldest. And he has a sickle, a sling, he's got some leather armor, and he started out with like a jar of fire oil and a tar pot or something like that. And he really liked that. And then my youngest was playing Belvin, and he really wanted to be decked out, so I let him pick his equipment. So he picked like plate mail, and so he's got max armor, and he's got a big warhammer, and he's a blacksmith. So he really wanted to be like a big fighty guy. And he also started out, when he rolled this, when my youngest rolled this character, he started out with a spell book. So we randomized the spell book, and he rolled the spell Thicket, and the only description that gives for Thicket, we could probably find it here. Here we go, Thicket. And the only description it gives is a thicket of trees and dense brush up to 50 feet wide suddenly sprouts up. So he had a blast with that, and he leveraged that to do a lot of fun, cool things that I would have never thought of. You know, his first few uses of it were kind of like, okay, so for example, like they were traveling to go do some quest, I forgot what it was. But they were going to do, they were traveling somewhere, and it was getting nightfall, so it was time to camp. Well, they're taking the road, and my youngest was like, well, I've got this spell book, I'm just going to cast Thicket right here, and make like a cool big donut around us, so we have like a little place to sleep. I'm like, that's cool, you're gonna do it right in the middle of the road? He's like, yeah. I'm like, okay, cool. So he summoned a thicket right in the middle of the road, this 50-foot donut of trees with like a little area right in the center where they could rest. And it led to some kind of fun things happening where, you know, travelers might come on the road and they're like, where's the road go? And then, you know, I say like there was some workers that were trying to like build a path around it. And as they were coming back, they encountered the workers, and then my son just decided to summon a thicket like right in the middle of them. So he was almost peeing himself laughing when I was describing, oh, the workers are like hanging from the suddenly sprouted trees. They're like, oh my god, I'm scared of heights. Oh, so much fun. But yeah, that thicket book came into effect later, but there's just... we've played so many hours of this, it's just hard to remember everything that we've done, and they've played these last two characters, Belvin and Scrog, they've played them for probably the longest, and they've been having a blast with them. So when we started Belvin and Scrog, when they rolled those characters, the storyline was that they were, you know, budding adventurers, and I was thinking more along the lines of like Elder Scrolls game, like you join the Fighters Guild and you just do random jobs. So I started them off doing that. So they joined like this adventurers kind of guild, and their first job was a quest that was basically right out of like an Elder Scrolls game. Like I think, what was it, Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind? There was a Fighters Guild quest to go fight rats for this old lady in Balmora, and she had a bunch of like rats in her basement, but she had like tons of pillows and stuff. So I kind of used that as like a basis. So their first job was to go to this old lady's house, who turned out to be like this cat lady, so she had tons of cats, and there was something that was in her basement that was eating her cats, and so she had the door barred. And so there was basically a bounty to clear out the basement and make sure her cats are safe. Well, because she's an old lady who loves cats, she's also likes to do crocheting and stuff like that. I just threw that in for flavor. And when they got to the basement, they went down there. You know, my youngest, Belvin, his character has a warhammer. So he's warhammer ready, he's full plate mail, he goes in first. And then my oldest, who's plays Scrog, who's got the sling, and he was holding a torch, he went in second, and almost lit the place on fire, because there was in the basement there was so many like pillows and like knitted blankets and like clothing and stuff like that she was storing down there, because she just loves to knit so much. And this rabid dog that was down there had like basically tore it all up, you know, and so there's just this fluff everywhere. So every time that the people would move around, I was saying that there's like all this fluff kicking up, and, you know, especially when there's a big tussle, sometimes like if you swing on a big warhammer, like a lot of that stuff could get knocked up, and there's like all this fluff and dander that's like kind of floating down onto this torch. And so it's like, you know, you're gonna risk igniting this entire thing on fire. So they're like, okay. So they put the torch on the ground and like started clearing out all the fluff while they're fighting off the dog. So just to try to keep, you know, from everything combusting. So that was a little fun challenge I just threw in there. And then they ended up the dog, I decided to start doing some cool tactics with the dog where we're trying to do like hit and run, so it would attack them, and then it would try to run in and like get lost in all this ruined fluff. And so they had a fun time trying to find it, and they eventually got it. They took it out. They disposed of the corpse for the old lady, so they got paid for that. Now, how they disposed of the corpse was they just threw it in a back alley, and apparently there was a homeless man there, and he started eating this rabid dog. And so their next job was to go help an apothecary, and they mentioned that they saw this homeless person eating a rabid dog, and the apothecary's like, "Oh, I'm going to have to prepare for an outbreak of rabies now. This is bad. I need you to go to the next town and get me these ingredients." So they went to the next town, talked to that town's apothecary, and they had a choice. They could either purchase the ingredients, which the first healer gave them a list, or they could pay for it with a favor. Well, they picked the favor. Now, the favor was the town apothecary had a rival, like someone she didn't like. And the favor was to publicly embarrass him. So what they ended up doing to embarrass him is they ended up finding out where this person lived in the town, waited for him to leave, then they broke in, and they looked around the place. I think one of them had like some chalk, so they started drawing a bunch of these weird like spell symbols all over the walls. And then my youngest cast thicket like right in the middle of his house. And then so they made their quick escape, and then they came back like, "What's this big tree doing here? Like there's a bunch of like, this is like witchcraft." And so everybody thought that this person was practicing witchcraft, and they ended up having a town meeting, like a court trial, and like exiled him. And the apothecary was very, very happy. So they got all the ingredients they needed. So just stuff like that. So this system is super simple, and everything just flows really well, and it gives you enough to get started. And even though this is a super tiny book, you don't really need 600 pages of rules to have fun. And for me, I always wanted to kind of play things by the rules. So when I was GMing either for D&D or for Pathfinder, I spent more time kind of second guessing myself, double checking rules, rather than just going with my gut and just sticking to a ruling and then addressing it later, which is what I should have done. But for Cairn, a lot of this stuff is just left up to the warden who is the GM in Cairn. So, but yeah, I love this system. It's fantastic. My boys just love playing this, and they love their characters. And one thing I want to try with Cairn, because I've seen people say that this is, it's a pretty cool system. It's fun for maybe one-shots, but I wouldn't use it for a long campaign. I don't know. I think that this could be really fun to do an actual campaign with. Like a full, long, campaign. Because of how the progression works, how the progression works through scars. So this is where like the rules are a little bit murky, and so this is where I was confused. So when an attack reduces a player character's hit protection to exactly 0, they are uniquely impacted. And then so I sped read this, and I thought like, okay, if they have 3 health and they take 3 damage and they don't have any armor, and it reduces their hit protection to exactly 0, then they get to roll a d12, because there's 12 entries on here, and then that's how they get a scar. But I was wrong, and it seems to me that whenever your hit protection goes to 0, so whether you take you know, if you've got 3 hit protection, no armor, and you take 3 damage or you take 30 damage, regardless of that, if you go 2-0, whatever damage you have left over, you're going to take this number. Now, if you go to exactly 0 and you don't have any damage left over, well, you're gonna just pick the first one, is how I envision this working. This I think is up to debate, you know, for various wardens who want to rule this, but for me, looking at this after someone pointed out to me in the comments from my first video that, hey, you might want to revisit how you handle scars, because I don't think it's how it's done. Thank you for that, by the way. That was fantastic. So if you look at the scars here, like the first scar is like lasting scar. So you roll a 1d6. And that determines where the scar is. So whether it's on neck, hands, eye, chest, legs, ear. So you do that, and then once you decide where it's at, you're going to roll another d6. And if the total is higher than your max hit protection, you take the new result. So if you got really unlucky when you rolled a character like I did when I was playing mine, when my eldest wanted to take a crack at being warden, I rolled a 1. So I had 1 hit protection, and I started with no armor. So I had no armor and 1 hit protection. So if something even looks at me, I'm basically dying, which is not good. On top of that, I rolled super low strength. I only had 8 strength. So not good. So needless to say, first chance I got, I went to a weapon shop and I bought a longbow and decided to keep my distance, just plinking at fools. And yeah, so with this scar, in my case, since I have 1 hit protection, that's my max. If I got this scar, I could roll a d6. Maybe I roll a 4 or 5. Guess what? That's my new max hit protection, which is cool. So more severe scars give you a lot better results. So for example, like if we look at Doomed, death seemed ever so close, but somehow you survived. If your next save against critical damage is a fail, you die horribly. If you pass, roll 3d6. If the total is higher than your max hit protection, take the new result. Now this is you know, if you took that much damage like over, you should have probably been dead, but this gives you doomed. Like it still gives you a chance to survive. But if you do live and you roll 3d6, you have a potential to have 18 hit protection. That's massive. That is huge. Now, you also have a potential to roll 3, which would suck. But, you know, cool stuff. So, all these scars are a really genius system that the more I play it, the more I love it. And I don't have to worry about experience or, you know, milestone leveling and all that stuff. Your progression is done through scars, and because combat is a very real and dangerous thing in this game, and every encounter, no matter who, can be potentially deadly. It really encourages you to try seeking other alternatives than just going in and, oh, I make an attack and then I'll try to move or something. Or you start looking for other things to do, like, you know, oh, you know, can I use my drill to attack the stone golem to make it enhanced? Heck yeah. Our last play session, my eldest, I was playing Scrog, and he had his tar pot, and they were given a job by some wealthy merchant in exchange for getting some cool spell books. They were given a job to obtain a tome from this traveling merchant. So they tracked this merchant down to this inn, and they ended up talking to the innkeeper, who was like, "Who are you looking for?" Like, going off of a description, like, "Oh, well, someone might be here if you make it worth my time." Well, my youngest, who is not very good at tracking money, looked at his money and was like, "Oh, I'll pay you 30 gold." And the innkeeper's like, "Yeah, this is the guy. This is his room key. And then also, here's another key. There's a trap door behind the inn that these merchants use to like try to escape. So if you want, I can block his door, and you guys can go in the back entrance and get him." So cool. So they went through the trapdoor. They found the path to his room. And by the time that they snuck up there, and then they got in the room, the merchant was like banging on his front door, like, I demand you open this instant. And so they used it to sneak up on him. And my eldest had this tar pot in his hand. It basically ended up like cramming it in the guy's face and just rubbing tar everywhere so he couldn't see. And then while he was disabled, like trying to see and do stuff, they were like rummaging through his bags and stuff like that, trying to find this big tome. So that was a super cool thing that where they completely avoided combat. They blinded this guy so they had no idea who they were, didn't even get a chance to look at him. Robbed this dude. They also managed to rummage through and find a few other things too. So they got some fat loot, like almost they basically had as much as they could carry. And then they just bamfed out of there. They just went back through and just left. And that was how they did it. So for that whole thing, I didn't even have to have them roll for it. It was like, my eldest was like, hey, because he had something on here that was like part of his physicality that was made him lithe or something like that. It's like very, very quiet. And his background was like a gravedigger. So I was like, okay, that's, you're probably used to sneaking around robbing graves. So sure, why not? So really fun. And because you're not having to roll for every little thing, it's easier for you to try stuff. So it's a lot more intuitive, especially for players who are not used to tabletop RPGs. And it's also nice from a perspective of somebody who is familiar with tabletop RPGs to just voice what you want to do. And then if it's feasible, you just do it. You don't have to roll some superfluous check. You just do it. If it's something that's kind of iffy, then you just make a save on one of your 3 stats. So, if you're trying to like move something or do something strength-wise, use strength. If you're trying to do something nimble or stealthy or dexterous, use dexterity. If you're trying to do anything else like charisma-based or like what you normally do for like intelligence or whatnot, you would just make a willpower save. And that's it. And because it's a roll under system, whatever your stat is. So, for example, Scrog, he has a dexterity of 15. So he's a super dexterous dude. And if I had him make a dexterity save, all he has to do is roll a d20 and tell me the number. He's like, oh, I rolled a 5. Well, is that at or underneath your dexterity? He's like, yeah. Then you succeed. Easy. So much easier than having to add like modifiers, especially like with Pathfinder. That's one thing I kind of love and hate about Pathfinder is that it feels like you have more meaningful progression because numbers get bigger, right? So your hit points get bigger, your bonuses, your modifiers get bigger. But sometimes, especially like at higher levels, that's a lot of math to do on the fly, and no one likes hitting a calculator in the middle of a thing. It just kind of slows things down. So I found that this just flows so much better, and I didn't feel limited at all in this game, even though there's only like 14 pages, 15. Okay, there's like 18 pages. There's only like 18 pages of rules, and most of these are just like equipment tables, spell tables, scars. If you need more, there's tons of resources here. So if you go to resources on this site, there's you can have more relics, there's more spell books, there's more equipment, there's more monsters. And if you're not confident in making up your own stuff, like your own adventures, there's tons of stuff here. So there's a bunch of originals. There's some conversions. There's future conversions that are being worked on. So if we go to originals, there's tons of different ones here that you can try just right now. if you go to conversions, there's tons of stuff that was converted from like other systems that you can try. So if you have an adventure that you might like, it's pretty easy to do a conversion. So the cool thing is, so we go to the SRD here, and let's go down. It was farther down here. So if we go here to creating monsters, right? You can use the following template to model or to model any more sophisticated monster or NPC. So you can make your own super easily. So you just tell what the name is, how much hit protection it has, how much armor it has, the strength, dexterity, and willpower, the weapon that it uses, as well as the damage die that it uses, and any special items or qualities that it has. That's all you have to do to make your own monsters. That's super quick, especially as a person who's doing GM duties or a warden in Cairn. It's much easier to prepare encounters and things like that. It's so much faster. Like there's a lot less prep time with Cairn, which is cool for me because I'm a busy person. I got a full-time job. I mean, I'm usually trying to make other YouTube content, so I spend a lot of time editing videos, and sometimes last thing I want to do is just start, sometimes it's really fun to go through and make encounters, but for me, I'm a very off-the-cuff improv kind of person, so I just sort of go things on the fly, and I'm even able to make up monsters on the fly with this template. That's how quick it is. So super cool stuff, and you can add other special effects or critical damage consequences. And if you need ideas, guess what? Go to resources and look at this. There's a ton of monsters. There's so many monsters here, and if you want to add some flavor to it, you just pick something that should be about the right stuff. So if you have a big bad boss, you probably want to pick something like a dragon. And here you go. Look, 100-foot long centipede-like reptilian creature. This is a big dude, right? So you can see we've got 14 hit protection. We got 2 armor, which is a pretty big deal. Also has pretty high stats, so 14 strength, 16 dex, 15 will. It has a bite attack, which is a D10, and it's also got claws, which is dual wielding, so it's D8 plus D8. So when it will attack, it'll roll 2 D8s and it will pick the highest number. So it's going to have lots of damage output. And it's also a blast, so it's like swiping at people, so you can hit multiple people. And it's also a detachment, which in the rules means that if multiple people are attacking a detachment, you don't each get to roll your damage die. Well, you do. Everybody who is attacking it rolls their damage, and then only the highest damage is applied. So, for example, I was using this mechanic in one of my play sessions, and my youngest has a warhammer that does D10, and my oldest was in the back using a sling, which does D4, right? So they both wanted to attack, so I had them both roll their damage die. My youngest ended up rolling a 1 on his D10, and then my oldest rolled a 3 on his D4. So it ended up using the 3 damage. So that's what we used. Now, this detachment really makes it so you can't just zerg down a boss. You got to be strategic. This was also I didn't like this at first, but then it kind of encouraged the players to start seeking other ways to impede or mess with this entity. So if you have one person who has a really, really heavy hitting thing, you might have them just keep at it, and then the other person who maybe only has a little sling is probably trying to do things like can I try and blind it, I might throw my fire oil at it or something like that, something that will not just cause direct damage but make it harder for the enemy to be effective. So really cool stuff. And yeah, so you just go here, pick monsters, and you can tweak things around at the end. So a basic bandit, 4 hit protection, no armor, 11 strength, 14 dex, 12 will, and they have a dagger which does D6. I mean, This is cool. So they're thieves who value wealth over all else, and they also use disguises, stealth, and trickery to surprise victims. So I've got a few encounters in mind that I can leverage bandits. So fun stuff there. So there's lots of different monsters already built into this. So you already have all that at your disposal. And I thought that there was something that kind of broke down like a rule of thumb when scaling difficulty. I'm trying to remember if I saw that here. Yeah, here it is. Ability scores. 3 is deficient, 6 is weak, 10 is average, 14 is noteworthy, and 18 is legendary. Adjust as necessary. So give average creature 3 hit protection, give hardy one 6, and some serious threats get 10 or more hit protection. So you can use flavor and style to help them stand out. Players will remember a pig-faced humanoid looking for his missing sheep more easily than a generic goblin archer. So lots of cool stuff that you can do here, and also you can leverage this critical damage. So use critical damage to lean into the threat or strangeness of any aggressive NPCs. Now, critical damage, again, is when you get reduced to 0 or below for your hit protection, you have to roll a strength save. So damage that reduces a target's hit protection below 0 decreases a target's strength by the amount remaining. So if I'm sitting at my 1 hit protection from my other guy, and I take 3 damage, but and I have no armor, that means I take 2 damage left over. So that means that gets subtracted from my strength. So if my strength was 9, my strength is now 7. On top of that, I have to make a strength save to avoid critical damage. Additionally, so here we go. So any PC that suffers critical damage cannot do anything but crawl weakly, grasping for life. So if I succeed and I don't take critical damage, I can keep fighting. If I take critical damage, I'm basically out for the count. Like the only thing I could do is crawl weakly, grasping for life, hoping that somebody saves me. This is where the threat of death becomes real. On top of that, because I took 2 damage, that means I would go to my scars table here, and I would apply this this scar here. So rattling blow. I'm disoriented and shaken. Describe how you refocus. Roll a 1d6. The total is higher than your max hit protection. You take the new result. So you get these scars, and this is basically how you progress as a character. You actually get stronger by failing, which is basically realistic, you know? So super cool. So sometimes monsters can have cool triggers that happen on critical damage. So if we were looking through here, so we've got, which one of these had a critical damage thing? Here we go, Wood Troll. Critical damage. Moss and twigs begin growing out of the target's wounds, which, what does that do? Who knows? You decide. You're playing the warden. So in this case, I might say, okay, maybe it stops the bleeding, so you're not gonna necessarily die, but it's gonna take longer to treat that wound and clean it. Or I might not be lenient at all. I might just say, yeah, it just makes it so it's a lot harder to clean that wound, so you probably have a greater chance of dying. For me, the game's already hard enough. I like to have positives and negatives rather than just all negatives. So, yeah, lots of cool things that you can do on like critical damage effects. Like I saw some of them were, I think, like a zombie. Go to resources, monsters. I think there was like a zombie one down here. There was something. It might have been vampire, maybe. Yeah, critical damage. The vampire drains the target's essence, dealing d12 damage to willpower. If the target reaches 0 will this way, it dies and is raised as a thrall of the vampire. That's insane. That would suck if you were fighting it and you were weak willpower and it rolled a 12 and just decimated you. You actually would die, your character would die, and then would come back as a thrall of the vampire. Holy balls. That's pretty cool. So, yeah, this guy is pretty close to being a legendary. He's definitely a tough encounter. He's got over 10 hit protection. He's got 1 armor, which makes that even harder. And he does D10, and he's got regeneration. So a damaged vampire regains 6 hit protection when it bites a target that has blood. Holy cow. If killed, it becomes a cloud of gas and retreats to its coffin, reforming the next nightfall. Can only be killed if exposed to sunlight or if the coffin is destroyed. So that's cool stuff. Like, that could be a really awesome quest to go kill some evil vampire, and it's like, it's going to be a hard battle. So if you're playing with a small amount of players, and if you want to have a harder difficulty, what you can do is, if we go back up to the SRD here, there's actually a section that was talking about hiring hirelings. Here we go. Player characters can hire hirelings to aid them in their expeditions. To create a hireling, roll 3d6 for each ability score, give them 1d6 hit protection and a simple weapon, and then roll on the character creation tables to further flesh them out. So you basically just make another, like, character. So I've got like 2 or 3 that are ready to go, just in case they decide to hire them. Right now, my boys are being really greedy, so they're like, you know, they're trying to hoard all their gold. So, you know, you pay them between like 1 to 3 gold per day, depending on, you know, how experienced they are. And I tried to make my hirelings like make sense. So, for example, like if I rolled a really bad character, I probably wouldn't hire that person. Like, I don't want some wispy elderly fat person, you know, who has 1 hit protection, no armor. Like, his background is something like he was a barber or something like that. Like, you probably don't want that guy to be your bodyguard. I mean, a goblin's gonna look at him and he's gonna die. But, you know, you might have somebody who's got like 3 hit protection. Maybe they got like 1 or 2 armor. You know, they've got like a sword or something like that. And then they're just like a standard, you know, roughneck adventurer bodyguard thing, you know. So that could be cool. So lots of cool stuff that we can do there. So really awesome. But yeah, that's enough of me rambling. I wanted to share my thoughts about this system, and now that I've had more time to play it, and I absolutely adore this game, and it's it's just so much damn fun. And the barrier to entry, there is none. You just go to this damn site, and you go to the game files here, which takes you to a Google Drive, which our best pal Yohai here has provided all this stuff for you. So you have all these PDFs here that you can just download. So you've got the booklet, which is the file that I downloaded. So you have the booklet. You also have like the character sheet. So if we look at that, this is a 2-page character. It's a landscape character sheet, because the character sheets are super small. So this is half of an 8.5 by 11 that's printed. Landscape. So you print those bad boys duplex. Again, you want to flip on the short side, and then it's got the rules on the back. And so that's a lot of easy rules to read. And yeah, so it's really cool to quickly reference those and say, okay, so damage, gotcha, okay, cool, I'm gonna roll damage, boom, and then you move on. You know, there's no flipping through 600 pages trying to find a specific rule for some feat that you may or may not have that might be in a different spot than where all the other feats are. I love it. So what I mean to say is, thank you for, first of all, my first video has absolutely blown up. Yeah, for some reason it's got just under 8,000 views. That's like my biggest video I've ever made. And I just kind of threw it together. It was just mostly me talking about this system. And I wanted to give an update after I've played it a bunch. And these are my thoughts. I don't know if I'm going to make any more Cairn content. There's a few other tabletop RPGs I do want to try. I think next in line I want to try Mouse Ritter. Because that's supposed to be really good with kids. So I guess it uses some similar rules, but so far we're just loving Cairn so much that we don't even really have an interest in trying anything else right now. So I guess we'll just keep playing this until until we get bored of it, which I don't know. If we get bored of it, it'll probably just be because I'm failing as a GM providing fun, entertaining, complicated puzzles and things like that. Like these rules, you could even, I mean, this rule set is super easy to leverage. So if you wanted to even make your own high fantasy, like a sci-fi setting, like you want to do space or something like that, you just swap out like all the equipment and stuff like that, and then, you know, maybe you've got different weapons that are like lasers and like lightsabers and I don't know, tasers and shock lances and I don't know, and you have a bunch of cool spells that could be like technology stuff that you might use. So instead of a spell book, you've got like a data chip or something like that. I don't know, it's cool. Anyway, I'm gonna stop rambling. Again, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it. I'll see you in whatever video I make next.